Williams, Vince Lombardi, Jack Kent Cooke, Joe Gibbs, Bobby Beathard, Bruce Allen, and Dan Snyder have been special. My special broadcast partners such as Sam Huff and Frank Herzog, and later with Larry Michael, Chris Cooley, and Doc Walk on radio, and the great TV talents such as Glenn Brenner and George Michael. We lived through the glory years together, the NFC East Championships and 5 Super Bowls, all great memories. And I would be remiss if I failed to mention WMAL, the Redskins flagship station, and my good friend Andy Ockershausen, who was responsible for bringing together the original broadcast team of Sonny, Sam, and Frank. After 62 years in professional football, I still have my health and wonderful family, with a special thanks to my beautiful wife Margot for letting me work the weekends for all those years. I'll always be a fan of professional football and appreciative of all it has done for me, my family, and our city. I leave you with these words. Hail to the Redskins.
Hardship was never part of Sonny Jurgensen's life until 1972, when it consumed his career and shattered his dreams. In his 9 years as a Redskin, Jurgensen set passing records that may never be matched. But what he wanted more than anything else was a championship. In the beginning of the season, he led Washington to 3 crucial victories, including a thrilling come-from-behind win over the Dallas Cowboys. But against the New York Giants, he tore his Achilles tendon and spent the rest of the year on crutches. Although he never realized his dream, he was still very much a part of the championship season. He instilled confidence in the offense and left with each man a renewed faith in the team.
The great voice of John Facenda on the great career of Sonny Jurgensen, and perhaps the most crushing, disappointing part of that great career when he could not participate in the Redskins Super Bowl run in 1972. Andy Pollin paying tribute to Sonny, as you just heard him say, retiring from football after 62 years, the last 38 in the Redskins radio booth, where he was as good as it ever was, and the team was as good as it ever was with Sonny, Sam, and Frank back in the 80s and the early 1990s. And looking back on both his playing career and his broadcasting career has given me great joy, I must say, over the last hour. We got 2 more hours to go and a lot of people to talk to, including Tony Kornheiser, in just a moment. But the relationship between Sonny and Billy Kilmer is very unusual for any period of time in football. Usually there is friction between the backup quarterback and the starting quarterback because, let's face it, the backup quarterback wants the starter's job. But Billy Kilmer and Sonny Jurgensen were great friends. And it was actually with pain, as we heard back in 1972, that Billy took over for Sonny when he went down with the injury.
Billy Kilmer repeats as the Redskin quarterback. Kilmer took over the signal calling role after Sonny Jurgensen was injured last Sunday. Kilmer has mixed emotions about subbing for Jurgensen.
He was having a fine year, and he worked awful hard all through training camp, and maybe I was closer than most people because I'd see him in meetings and things, and he really worked real hard. Wanted to have a championship year, and he was playing at championship caliber, and I know how he feels.
Yeah, well, Billy did take over, and the Redskins, thanks to the defense, thanks to Larry Brown, and thanks to Kilmer, who played very well. He was not as skilled as Jurgensen. His ball wobbled. Sonny threw one of the most beautiful passes you'll ever see. Billy, as Sonny once said, couldn't completely get his fingers around the football. He had a hand that just didn't spread the fingers like Sonny was able to do, and that's why he wasn't able to get the grip and throw it the way he did. But he got the job done, and he got the team to the Super Bowl where they lost to the Miami Dolphins. But this is a story that Sonny told on Andy Ockershausen's Our Town podcast about that Super Bowl, about that day in Los Angeles in 1973 when he so badly wanted to be on the field with his teammates.
George Allen didn't want me to be on the bench. I was on crutches. I'll never forget standing on the sidelines.
The Coliseum, right? Los Angeles.
The Coliseum. And I walked by, they were playing the Miami Dolphins, and I walked by Don Shula, was standing there.
The coach of the Miami Dolphins.
The Miami Dolphins coach. And he said, Sonny, I'm sorry you're not going to play in this game. He said it would be a better game if you could be in it. He said, but I know how hard you worked to get here. And I said, nope, can't do it. So they put me up in a booth.
I remember that way up in the bow, way up top.
It was Jack Kent Cook's box.
He didn't want any distractions, right, George?
That's right. And I could have helped Billy. I really could have.
Yeah, that's a sad chapter in Sonny Jurgensen's career, but mostly happy thoughts. And really, the relationship, as I said, between Billy and Sonny, incredible. Because the following year, Sonny came back and was healthy enough to play, and we had a real live quarterback controversy, complete with bumper stickers. There were I like Sonny stickers and I like Billy stickers. And as you drove around town, you saw them on cars everywhere. And Sonny told Andy a story of actually riding around with Billy and looking for stickers.
When Billy and I would go out in my car or in his car, whenever we would see a bumper sticker, if it said I like Billy, I would give him the bird. And if it said I like Sonny, he would give him the bird. So we'd flip them off and keep going. And they'd say, that was Jurgensen and Kilmer together there.
Could you imagine that, driving around the Beltway and getting flipped off by Sonny? Tony Kornheiser is with us. Came to town after Sonny finished playing, but certainly knows Sonny's place in the area. And I said this earlier, you have better perspective than I would, having grown up in New York. I think, Tony, that Sonny is to Washington what Mickey Mantle is to New York. Do you agree?
That's incredible praise. Well, I mean, I would agree in the sense that he is beloved, but Mickey Mantle died much younger than Sonny is now. I mean, Sonny has been around here for so long that he is just part of the sports fabric. He lives here. He didn't leave or anything like that. He's visible. He did this for so long. I got here in 1979. I don't remember listening to a game without him. I don't remember that. I had, over the years, I met him a bunch of times. I always enjoyed being around him. I would not say we were friends or anything like that. We were acquaintances, but he was quite kind in terms of talking to just about anybody around him. You've mentioned other people, I'm sure, today who I would not put in that category, but Sonny was, and yeah, I do think, in the time that I'm here, who were the most beloved people? Well, Sonny and Riggins, I would think. Right. I mean, they're it.
Maybe Ovechkin now after the Cup.
Oh no, that's a niche sport. No, when you have the advantage of being an NFL player, that's a much, much larger deal. I mean, Wes Unseld is in that category. Yeah. But I don't think. I just think that if you're a football player, it's higher. It's higher in this city. Yeah. For so many years there was no baseball team, and for so many years the hockey teams and the basketball teams were, just sort of ordinary. Yeah. Not particularly competitive.
Well, and the comparison with Mantle is different, too. Mantle won a bunch of World Series. Sonny never started a playoff game and was never participating in a winning playoff game. They didn't win a lot with Sonny. It's different.
Yeah. Yeah. But, I mean, each city has its own particular ethic of what they look for. I mean, Mantle is that. Namath is that in New York. Right. Namath has stayed pretty much in New York his whole life, so... Yeah, bigger deal. There are some of us who remember the bandwagon columns from the 1991 season. And when I think of that, the soundtrack is kind of Sonny, Sam, and Frank, those years. They were great.
Yeah.
I mean, the broadcast now is not anywhere near what it was then. It's just not. They were great. They did it all the time. They were, enthusiastic. They were also critical. I mean, Sonny could be critical with just one word. Like somebody would say something and you'd hear Sonny go, really? He was very, very good at that. And that was a great, great broadcast. Great broadcast.
No question. Talking to Tony Kornheiser. Also, the way Washington was in those days, that they had Duke Zebert's, which was the power place for lunch, where big media people would meet and big business people, and Jack Kent Cook would hang out there. Sonny was kind of a part of that scene too, wasn't he?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he was a downtown guy. Yeah. He was a visible presence. I mean, I mentioned Riggins before. John, would be at home in a treehouse. Yeah. I mean, John is not as smart as he is, as gregarious as he will be when he wants to be, he is not somebody who you would see downtown nearly as much as you would see Sonny Jurgensen. Sure.
Yeah, no question about it. What do you think the connection was with Sonny and the fan base? Why do you think that he is so beloved here, having not won as a player?
Well, who did win here?
Briggins, Theismann.
But I mean, that's much later than Sonny's career.
Yeah.
In Sonny's career, who particularly won? Nobody won, right?
Nobody in
won
town.
A championship.
Nobody in town. Yeah. So
yeah, I think that. He's. What is the relationship? I mean, he was on the radio a lot. He was on television a lot.
Right.
He came to stand. This is past his active career. He came to stand for somebody who stood with this team for a long period of time, and he was a relatively approachable guy. People liked him. He sounded like he was from here. You can do that accent. I can't do it.
He's from North Carolina.
Sounded like he was from this area. He didn't come in from somewhere else looking or sounding or acting different.
Yeah.
He sounded like he was from here, right?
Yeah, I think so. But it had a pretty much of a drawl from Wilmington, North Carolina. It was a little bit more southern than perhaps I think it is. But I guess
I didn't understand a word he said the first time. I didn't understand a word of it. But you do that. You used to do, for people who don't know what I'm talking about, that Mo Siegel impersonation.
Yeah, well, Mo was.
And they sort of sounded alike to me.
Well, Mo was Atlanta, so it was sort of like this, and not exactly like Sonny does. So it was a little bit different. But yeah,
I mean, I always where I was born and raised in that period of time in the 60s and 50s and 60s and 70s, Washington was always referred to as a southern town.
Mm-hmm.
So for me to hear somebody with a southern accent seemed to fit the area.
Yeah. The other part of his career, beyond radio and his playing career, is television, which you have obviously thrived in, and what he was able to do with, I think, the two greatest sportscasters we've ever had.
Glenn and then with George.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of, I mean, in a lot of ways, that paved the way for what you and Wilbon do, didn't it, in some ways?
No.
No?
I mean,
not at all?
I don't think so. I think it's entirely different. Those were on news shows and very specific football shows, and what Mike and I were doing was ultimately patterned on Siskel and Ebert more than that.
Mm-hmm.
But here's Sonny. Like the three, look, you can, somewhere down the road in 2050, there's going to be a different order of this. But in the golden age of sports television in Washington, D.C., Sonny Jurgensen sat in a booth with Frank Herzog, who's the best play-by-play guy ever. And then he sat on a set with Glenn Brenner, brilliant and funny, and he sat on a set with George Michael, who made, I think George, more than either of the other guys, made sports an industry in this city.
Right.
And was innovative in ways that the others weren't. The three giants, there's nobody out there now, and there hasn't been for a long time, who can even approach, they're not even in the same area code with those guys. And Sonny was a partner to all of them. So I think that's what made it such a big deal.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that, and again, George understood after Glenn died, not that it was a vulturous situation, but if he could get Sonny, he was going to go out and get him, and he did. And I don't know if you remember this, but there was an actual court case over this, whether
Sonny was prevented from crossing over from 9 to 4 for a little while because I think he had to wait for his contract to be up. I don't think he could just go and do that. He was legally prevented, but when he was able to do it, he did it.
Yeah. There was also the first year that was then 570 had the Redskin games. Sonny remained under contract here at 630, and they worked out a deal where he would do the games, and then he would go on with Beatrice as soon as the game was over. And I don't think he really.
Big a deal. I mean, people trusted him. They liked him. They wanted to hear from him. I think they still do. So. Like did he do? I watched it on television. Did he do the game last night on radio, and that was it, or did he not even do it?
No, he had recorded an announcement about this, and they played it about 7:30, and Larry and Cooley and Doc all reacted to it.
Who's going to do the game? Who's going to take his place?
Well, I don't think they will have anybody take his place. I think it's going to be Cooley and Larry and Doc. I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I
They
think.
ought to get buck hands.
Well, that's something you can take up with Dan Snyder, I guess.
Yeah, well,
But,
I mean, and just,
Yeah. All right.
people really like him. He's a terrific play-by-play guy. I mean, there's got to be room on broadcast in this city for him. I'm just,
I agree.
I don't understand why he's not doing the basketball.
I absolutely agree. We're going to talk to Buck at 8:30 this morning. Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it.
Welcome. Bye.
Thank you. That's Tony Kornheiser, and of course you can hear his podcast and hear him on PTI. But as I mentioned to Tony, the bandwagon columns, and this is the 1991 season, and the Redskins are good. We know that coming out of training camp. We don't know how good, and they opened the season on a Sunday night, and they beat the Detroit Lions 45-0. Now Barry Sanders was hurt and didn't play. Okay. Sanders plays, maybe it's 45-10, but they're good. They're really good. And Tony realizes there's opportunity here. And he begins to write these columns in Tuesday's paper. That was his day. This is when Tony was writing, I believe, 3 columns a week. One of them was a style column, which was geared toward humor, and that would run on Sundays. But he would write 2 sports columns a week. And the Tuesday column was always the bandwagon column, where he would pretty much make fun of how good they were. And he had various characters, and he never referred to Joe Gibbs as Coach Joe Gibbs. It was just Coach Joe. He had various talkers on the team. Jeff Bostic is one of them. Mark Addix, who's become a very well-known surgeon, was one of his go-to guys. And he would talk about how great they were and how ridiculous it was that they were just rolling over everybody. The Redskins got to 11-0. And people again wonder, is it a good idea to go undefeated? Of course they want to go undefeated, but they wound up losing a game to the Dallas Cowboys at home, helped in part by a Hail Mary pass to Michael Irvin just before the half, and they lost 2 games that year. They lost the game at the end of the season against the Eagles, where Joe Gibbs was resting all of his players, and he didn't care because they had everything clinched, and they rolled through the playoffs, and they beat, Atlanta in the first round, and they beat Detroit for the championship, and then they go to the Super Bowl, and Tony actually went in a bandwagon to write about it. It was an RV that they drove from here to Minneapolis, where the Super Bowl was, and he wrote columns about it. And I mention it because when you think of that, you think of Sonny, Sam, and Frank, and you think of the great joy that was in the booth and the way that they celebrated how good the team was, not just that year, but the 9-year stretch from when they won their first one after the 82 season until that one in 1991, where it was 4 Super Bowls, and the Riggins years where they had the diesel horn in the booth. And it was a kind of period of time where, Redskin wins were expected, much like today, where the expectations are so low that the fans have been beaten down by mediocrity by so many years. The expectations were so high that on an odd year where they wouldn't make it to the Super Bowl, or even an odder year, like after they won in 1988 with Doug Williams, when they didn't make the playoffs and had a losing season the following year. That was crazy. That was like, wow. That would be like now the Redskins going 12-4. And that's the kind of period of time it was. And again, the soundtrack of that, Sonny, Sam, and Frank. We're going to talk to Frank Herzog coming up at 8 o'clock this morning, get his memories of 22 years in the booth with Sonny. Len Shapiro, who covered the Redskins as a reporter for the Washington Post when Sonny was finishing up his career. We'll get to him at 7:45. And next up, the man who made the magic happen in the booth, Sonny's good friend, Andy Ockershausen, the great general manager of this radio station, 630, when it was the kingpin of Washington, when it had Hardin Weaver in the morning, Trumbull and Core in the afternoon, it had the Redskins football, it had Ken Beatrice on Sports Talk, it had Maryland basketball and football. It was the station for sports and everything else. And Andy O was the man who ran it and the one who was the genius behind Sonny, Sam, and Frank. And we'll talk to him about that decision coming up next. Andy Pollin in our tribute show to Sonny Jurgensen, who has decided to retire after 38 years in the Redskins booth. Back right after this.
Now, from ESPN 630, your D.C. Sports Center.
Well, it wasn't the kind of debut the Redskins were hoping for from rookie quarterback Dwayne Haskins. 2 interceptions. One of them went the other way for a touchdown. Redskins lost to the Browns 30-10, although 2 of the Browns' touchdowns were late, one on a TD pass by a fourth-string quarterback and an 86-yard punt return. Colt McCoy did not play, along with a number of others who are listed as starters on the depth chart. Next preseason game Thursday against Cincinnati. Sonny Jurgensen has retired after 38 years in the radio booth. We continue our tribute until 9 o'clock this morning. Nats open up a weekend series tonight in New York against the Mets, who are on a tear with 13 wins in the last 14 games. Steven Strasburg starts tonight. Nats have a 2-game lead on Milwaukee in the wild card race and a 2.5-game lead on the Cardinals, Mets, and Phillies. Orioles home tonight against the Astros, and the Mystics were winners over Indiana. D.C. area weather, sunny today with a high of 89. Andy Pollin, ESPN 630.
The Carol Maloney Show.
Clinton Portis, let's talk about the quarterback. Who do you think is going to be starting week 1?
With this schedule, if you put Haskins in the fire and he goes 1-5, then this city and this fan base gets after him and the negativity start. How does he recover?
Right.
Let guys go out and have some fire, desire. Wait till the preseason is over. You don't have to rush to name a starter.
Carol Maloney, weekday mornings at 10 on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
At the Big Screen Store, it's game on. Just in time for football. 2 75-inch Samsung 4K TVs, just $19.99. Whoa, that's 2 for $19.99. The Big Screen Store. At the Big Screen Store, our prices beat Best Buy and online, guaranteed. Plus, we double the Samsung warranty, and you get delivery and installation installed by pros on your schedule. Not even Amazon can do that. The Big Screen Store. The Big Screen Store is your motion furniture headquarters with innovative furniture featuring power headrests, full power recline, USB ports, lighting and accessories, power lumbar support, plus an incredible selection. The Big Screen Store. At the Big Screen Store, it's game on. Just in time for football. 2 75-inch Samsung 4K TVs, just $19.99. Whoa, that's 2 for $19.99. The Big Screen Store.
You're thinking of remodeling your kitchen or bathrooms, but you aren't sure who to call or where to start. Make it easy for yourself. Call 800-NEW-REMODEL. Remodel USA has worked with thousands of area homeowners to remodel their homes. They're a family-owned and operated business with a transparent process. From design to installation, they do it all. You'll love what Remodel USA can do. You'll finally have the kitchen or bathroom you've always wanted. Your home's value will increase, and you'll be amazed at how efficient the process was. Start with a consultation and estimate. Call 800-NEW-REMODEL, and an experienced pro will come to your home to discuss the possibilities. In fact, call now to get 60% off the installation of your new kitchen or bathroom, plus $2,500 off just for being an ESPN 630 listener. Just mention ESPN 630 and you'll save $2,500 on top of the 60% installation discount. Call now, 800-NEW-REMODEL. That's 800-NEW-REMODEL or 800newremodel.com for Remodel USA.
Sonny hurls a honey to Bobby Mitchell, and it's touchdown, Washington.
This is ESPN 630 special coverage. Saluting Sonny.
For Washington, Joe Gibbs has turned it over to Doug Williams today. Now, a man who is familiar with past quarterback controversies in Washington, Sonny Jurgensen. He's with Jimmy the Greek. Let's go to the Greek.
Hey, Brent, I got Sonny, Hall of Famer. He's had a few controversies in quarterbacks. Tell us about the one in Washington, Sonny.
Jimmy, I really don't think there's a controversy there as far as Doug Williams and Jay Schrader. It was just a matter of Coach Gibbs and the staff getting some production from the quarterback position. Jay wasn't doing it. He was in a slump. They put in Doug Williams, and he performed. He brought him back against the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, but Williams is 0-2 starting and 3-0 coming in.
There's a little different pressure on you when you're a starter. There's a lot of responsibility as far as leading the team. Coming off the bench is no pressure. You're only getting in the game because the guy that was playing poorly.
Well, that's my question, because there's some talks of Williams being a little bit on the choke side.
Well, I wouldn't suggest that in any way. I think that today he's got to make the plays. If he doesn't play well today, look for Joe Gibbs to go back to Schrader. I like the Redskins. I think if they can get the matchups in the secondary against their little receivers, they can win this football game.
Okay, Brent, you got it.
All right, that was Sonny Jurgensen with Brent Musburger and Jimmy the Greek back in 1988 as the Redskins were in the playoffs and on their way to the Super Bowl. That was from Chicago. And you heard Jimmy the Greek refer to Doug Williams as being a little bit on the choke side, which Sonny was obviously smart enough to say, whoa, no, that's not the case. And as a matter of fact, the following week, after the Redskins had beaten the Bears, they came back here to play the NFC Championship game against the Minnesota Vikings, and in the days leading up to that, the crew of Brent and Jimmy and Phyllis George, I believe at the time, were having lunch at Duke Ziebert's on Martin Luther King's birthday, and a reporter from Channel 4 went around getting reaction to Martin Luther King's birthday, and Jimmy the Greek pretty much hung himself by using terms about African Americans, which were very objectionable, going on a stupid rant about high thigh bones and not having the necessity, all kinds of ridiculous things, and he was fired by CBS, so that wound up being his last game. But that was Sonny as part of the pregame show on that day in Chicago. Andy Ockershausen has been a longtime executive, the greatest, I think, radio executive this town has ever had, built WMAL into a powerhouse, and was the one who brought in Sonny Jurgensen into the radio booth with Frank Herzog and Sam Huff after they'd worked together for a few years and made the magic happen in the 80s and the 90s. And Andy's with us this morning. Morning, Andy O.
Hey, this sounds so great. Andy. Glad to hear you on 6:30 a.m.
Good to be here and good to have you with me. What was the spark that made you say, hey, we got a good radio booth here with Frank and Sam, but I want to add Sonny?
I don't think any one thing, Andy. Mostly it was his ability, and it was so superb, and he was available. As you know, he had been working for CBS television, and the CBS thing has ended, and he was available. And it was a natural move for us. It was an easy call.
Okay. And you and Sonny go how far back? To his playing days?
Oh, sure. When he came here to Washington, he came in with a green Corvette, and it was such a well-known car around town. And he was in the Corvette, and we had a television station on Connecticut Avenue, and he was doing some television work for us. And he was, going to be a spark, and he sure as heck was, because he came to Washington as a free agent, not free, but he was available, and he just worked right into the whole thing.
So you were working in television when he came to town?
Yes.
Okay, and you put it. Who made the decision? Because I remember he had a show, and I remember one year he had Vince Lombardi on as a guest, which was really cool. It was your idea to have a Sonny Jurgensen television show?
Well, it wasn't my idea, but I think pretty much so. This was long before his playing days, and his playing days were over when he was playing, and he had a chance to work with Vince Lombardi. And, man, that was heaven and earth for us for TV. Sonny with Vince was such a sure thing.
Yeah.
And we had a show, as a matter of fact, with old television, old B-roll. We brought in on a little projector and showed it the plays and so forth that had Lombardi disfected. And that was unheard of in the day. And Vince was he was very versatile.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Sonny, as we've talked about, was incredibly versatile, not just with football but with basketball, and did television work with Maryland basketball and radio work too. What did he do? All the games? I don't think he could have. He must have done a select few on radio, right?
Well, and he didn't do any. He was a television personality. He was a local personality at the time. And he didn't have time for radio, and didn't have time for us, and wasn't a part of our plan originally. He was when he came to Washington, he came as TV, and came from Philadelphia.
Okay, so had he done television in Philadelphia?
I don't know whether he had actually been on as a performer, as a regularly scheduled show, or he was there temporarily. Little bits and pieces in Philadelphia.
Right.
So when he came to Washington, he and Sam, they each were going to work at Channel 7, and we were smart enough lucky enough to have them both on a television. Sam did Wednesdays and Sonny did Thursdays, or Thursdays and Wednesdays. just the opposite. They were on Channel 7.
And what did they do?
They would recap the game. Sam would talk about the defense and Sonny about the offense.
Huh.
And it's pretty much what they were doing and what they were known for.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Sam and Sonny played together, I guess, about 4 years. Sam retired, then he came back a year with Lombardi, but Sonny's career went on after that. And Sam really paved the way for Sonny to become a full-time broadcaster because Sam was doing that while Sonny was still playing, right?
Well, Sam was early retirement. We thought it was early for him. Matter of fact, we had a day for Sam at the stadium, and we gave him an automobile when he retired. And the next year when he came back, I called him and said, "Look, you got to give that car back because we ain't giving you, but you're still going to be playing."
Yeah.
So he was natural for radio. I don't think he had done any work like that, and we put him permanently on a show.
Yeah.
And he was great. He was fabulous.
Yeah.
But he was Sam, and he was same old Sam. And then when Sonny Wood had the opportunity with CBS, and it was doing so great, he suddenly it was something happened with him and Brookshire with doing the color, and they weren't going to work, and so forth and so forth. So Sonny was certainly dumped by CBS at that time.
Yeah.
I mean by the network,
Mm-hmm.
and it was CBS, and he was available. And it was so natural that they would work together on on radio, because they had worked together as friends and as colleagues.
Right, and you had a great orchestra leader who we'll talk to in just a few minutes, Frank Herzog, who made it work between the two. He would say, "I got a Hall of Famer to my left, I got a Hall of Famer to my right," and and sometimes they would argue, and sometimes they would agree, and it just really flowed. And it was like, I guess what you're talking about, and this is new to me, how much Sonny and Sam had done television work together while they were still playing. So the transition to radio was probably pretty easy for them because, much like Tony and Mike on PTI, they had been doing these newsroom arguments at the Washington Post long before they got on television. So it was
absolutely. So what they did off the air was important as what they did on the air, and that was to develop the chemistry. That was with them. One was offense, one was defense, and they both worked together. And so it was an easier exchange for Sam and Sonny than it was for normal.
We're talking to Andy Ockershausen, a great executive in radio and television in this town, who put Sonny, Sam, and Frank together in the radio booth. I think the thing that people like to remember best, Andy, is the 80s and the 90s when the Redskins were going to Super Bowls on a regular basis, 4 of them over a 9-year period. And it's almost like they paraded, and even when they were on the West Coast, the parade would leave Pennsylvania Avenue and head west to wherever the Super Bowl was, and everybody went, right? Wasn't it kind of like that?
It was incredible. We had the first time they went to Los Angeles to play in the Super Bowl, we had little Sonny and Sam and Redskins banners made up, and we put them on every airplane that we could find at Dallas going to California. And it was so a magical time to do those things that I think you couldn't do that now. But we just loved it.
Yeah.
We love promoting them.
And I talked about this. I don't know whether it was his idea or somebody in management's idea, but Bert Cullen with the diesel horn for Riggins.
Oh God,
Tell that story.
The Rigo drill with Bert Cohen with his diesel horn, and it worked for so many years, and it was really a part of the program. It was a moment that you can't imagine. You can't imagine what the Rigo drill was. It was just more than Rigo. It was the whole team came alive.
Yeah. I mean, who was it that called him the Diesel? Was it Sonny or Sam, or do you remember how that nickname came about?
I don't know. Could have been Bert.
Mm-hmm.
Could have been Bert with his horn, with his understanding of what was going on, and
right.
could have been Could have been Bert, but I'm glad you remember because that was so important part of it, Andy. That everybody was part of the show. And it was always Sonny and Sam, and they would in a disagreement, and then they would beef that, and Frank in the middle, and poor Frank in the middle sometimes was important, and he would settle any argument. But the town, the whole town was turned on. Everything was big for the Redskins.
Yeah,
big for the Redskins.
And big this way, too. We know what expense accounts are like these days. But in those days when the money was coming in a little bit better, and a trip to the Super Bowl isn't a couple of days, it's a week. And I imagine you guys ran up some pretty big tabs in those days.
Well, it was constantly a fight with Sam about money.
Mm-hmm.
He was always felt he was underpaid, and he did. And Sonny he wanted to make the same money Sonny was making. I said, well, quarterbacks don't make. Linebackers don't make the money that quarterbacks make, and that's the way it is, Sam. And it was the only could be for them to make the money, and it was big. It was big. We went to the Super Bowl in Los Angeles, and I gave the guys WML sweaters to wear, and they were all wearing, even though they're the other in the station. George Michael was wearing them, but Glenn Brenner was wearing them, and so their own stations were grazing heck about us using them to do these beautiful sweaters, and the other guys were saying, well, we didn't want to provide us with clothes. Go ahead and do it. And they did provide us with clothes.
Oh, and it's great. It was great advertising on television, no question. Not that you guys needed it in those days, because MAL was number one across the board, wasn't it?
Oh, well, it was certainly number one. It was the whole station that came along.
Yeah.
Johnny and Ken in later years that they went with us to the game, then Trumbull and Core. And we just brought them along, and everybody was concentrated on Washington Redskins. It was a time this doesn't happen anymore. I guess there are too many diversions now.
No, too much losing. Not enough winning. Not enough Super Bowls. That's the problem. That's it.
I don't know. It was also, even when they weren't winning Super Bowls, they were still winning the hearts and minds of young fans, and I guess they're all old now. They're like us, Andy.
I guess so. Yeah, there aren't many of us left that saw Sonny play, and not many like you who saw Sammy Ball play. So,
Oh, that's right. I did. I saw Sammy Ball play in 1937. Play with the Redskins, and he played his whole career, and that's something unheard of. Sammy Ball was a Redskin for his whole
16 years.
career.
16 years. Of course, Darryl Green did it for 20, but in those days, that was incredible. I know you're still very close friends with Sonny. He has a place in Florida. Will he be spending much time here in the D.C. area?
I don't think he's going to be back at all.
Mm.
He'll come up because he has family up here.
Yeah.
But they're Floridian now. He's a Florida guy, and he loves it, and his wife loves it, and he loves his wife, and therefore he's going to Florida. And now you just stay there.
Okay.
And that's the way it is now. I guess that's the way it was, Andy.
Well, tell him to come back once in a while and say hello, because everybody has great feelings for him, and we'll certainly miss him on the radio and have great memories of what we just talked about, the glory days of the Redskins and Sonny, Sam, and Frank. Thanks, Andy. I'll bump into you soon.
I wanted to tell you a quick story, Andy.
Go ahead.
We were sitting in Duke's Everett's at lunchtime with 3 or 4 guys that we know, sitting in at lunch, and who comes in and starts at the end of his lunch has a word to say for Sonny was Admiral Rickover.
Mm.
The
World War II.
Sergeant of the Navy. So Rickover didn't know Sonny from the Man in the Moon, but he knew something was wrong, and he came by the table and he said, "You ought to be ashamed of yourself, letting yourself go like that. You're so a young man."
Really?
And he walked away.
Is that right?
Cold, stone cold. Absolutely, he had no idea who Sonny was.
Sonny, I mean, Sonny was being overweight.
Yes, he seemed overweight at the time.
He had a little pot belly when he played. He never, even in his playing days were over, he never got completely out of shape.
used to be criticized by his stomach. He said, "You don't throw with your stomach."
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
But he had the same problem with the public.
Yeah.
I guess they picked him up, but
Yeah.
Rickover was something else.
Absolutely.
And it was just at the side, Andy. It's something. That's how magic the town was in those days.
Absolutely.
But,
all right, Andy.
that again.
Good to talk to you.
Andy, great to hear you on 6:30, Andy.
Thank you, sir. Talk to you soon. Len Shapiro covered the Redskins as a reporter with the Washington Post, also covered broadcasting, Sonny. He was the media critic, sports media critic for the Post for a number of years, and we're going to talk to Len coming up next. Frank Herzog at 8 o'clock. Stay with us in our special tribute to Sonny Jurgensen here on ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.
Stephen A. Smith.
So if you're saying Presti, no disrespect because he is an astute general manager, you had Russell Westbrook, you had Kevin Durant, you had Paul George, you had Victor Oladipo. You don't have one single championship to show for that. Show me one executive that has had that level of talent that has not won a championship. It has never happened. So to me, why should I believe it's going to happen now?
Weekdays 1 to 3, it's Stephen A. Smith, Washington's new ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.
Tacos, travel, haircuts, hotels. With the PenFed Power Cash Rewards Visa Signature Card, you earn cash back on everything, everywhere, from gas to groceries and concerts to cruises. So don't just earn cash back on some things, earn it on everything. Everyone is eligible to apply. Visit PenFed.org. To receive any advertised product, you must become a member of PenFed, insured by NCUA.
PenFed's got great rates for everyone. Planning to sell your home or had it previously listed and it didn't sell? Call the Reynolds team. Sarah and Debbie Reynolds with Keller Williams Realty are killing it for home sellers. For over 30 years, Sarah and Debbie have been helping thousands of families sell and buy homes in our area. If you want to maximize the sale of your home, here's why you need to call Sarah and Debbie Reynolds. They already have the buyers. Over 8,000 buyers in waiting. These buyers are screened and looking to buy right now. As a result, they sell their homes 3 times faster and net their sellers 6% more money on average. That's $30,000 more in your pocket. If your home doesn't sell, Sarah and Debbie will buy it at a price agreeable to you, guaranteed in writing. Call Sarah and Debbie right now at 800-718-8169. That's 800-718-8169. Or visit DebbieHasTheBuyers.com. DebbieHasTheBuyers.com. You're thinking of remodeling your kitchen or bathrooms, but you aren't sure who to call or where to start. Make it easy for yourself. Call 800-NEW-REMODEL. Remodel USA has worked with thousands of area homeowners to remodel their homes. They're a family-owned and operated business with a transparent process. From design to installation, they do it all. You'll love what Remodel USA can do. You'll finally have the kitchen or bathroom you've always wanted. Your home's value will increase, and you'll be amazed at how efficient the process was. Start with a consultation and estimate. Call 800-NEW-REMODEL, and an experienced pro will come to your home to discuss the possibilities. In fact, call now to get 60% off the installation of your new kitchen or bathroom, plus $2,500 off just for being an ESPN 630 listener. Just mention ESPN 630 and you'll save $2,500 on top of the 60% installation discount. Call now, 800-NEW-REMODEL. That's 800-NEW-REMODEL or 800newremodel.com for Remodel USA.
Sonny Jurgensen, one of the foremost bombardiers in the NFL.
This is ESPN 630 special coverage. Saluting Sonny.
Sonny Jurgensen, one of the foremost bombardiers in the NFL, led the Redskins to their most impressive victory against the Cowboys in D.C. Stadium. Behind 21-0 in the first half, Jurgensen faces the unenviable task of fighting an uphill battle. Charlie Taylor revitalizes the Redskins with this 38-yard reception. Jurgensen spears Taylor again between 2 Cowboys, and the streamlined back dives into the end zone to put the Redskins on the scoreboard.
That was Sonny Jurgensen, his second year with the Redskins, 1965, when he pulled off a great comeback against the Cowboys, adding to what was already a legendary career and would become even more legendary as he continued in his 11 years in Washington. Andy Pollin paying tribute to Sonny, who announced last night, as you heard it here on ESPN 630, that he is hanging up the headphones. He's giving up radio and working in the booth as he has since 1981 and ending a run in the NFL that started in 1957 when he was drafted in the fourth round by the Philadelphia Eagles. 62 years in the NFL. And covering the final years of his playing career, Len Shapiro, formerly of the Washington Post, a friend who joins us now and picked up the Redskins beat what year, Len?
Partly 72 and all of 73.
Okay, so you saw the two of the three last years of his career. And Sonny, has made his career in the media pretty much since then as a radio and television voice. How was he with the media as a player?
Well, I don't want to say difficult, but he was sort of elusive. I've never seen a player after a game dress so quickly. You had a 10 or 12 minute cooling off period after games before they would allow the media to go into the locker room. And by the time they allowed us into the locker room, Sonny's locker at RFK was empty. That was the bad news. The good news is that one of my colleagues, the late, great Kenny Denlinger, who was a columnist for the Post, figured out what his escape route was because he knew where he parked his car. So Kenny would wind up going out to underneath the stadium where Sonny was allowed to park, met him at the car, got a couple of quotes, and then we were all good to go.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms, and we always ask Sonny about that. He says, right after the game, I just needed to think about things, and I just wasn't ready to talk about what happened. It wasn't a malicious thing. He just wanted to get his head together before he started answering questions. And once you got him, in the locker room or in a more relaxed situation, of course he was great.
Oh yeah. A great talker, a great storyteller. But nowadays, I guess he'd get fined for not showing up for the media, right?
Yeah, exactly. And but boy, what a quick shower, if he did take a shower at all.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking to Len Shapiro, formerly Washington Post. The year you mentioned, the full year, 72, that's the year he got hurt. And I think of all the years that he played, and he played 18 years in the NFL, that had to be the most devastating for him, having to watch the team play in the Super Bowl and watching Jack Kent Cook's box as George Allen wouldn't even let him on the sidelines. You covered that Super Bowl for the Post. What are your memories of Sonny and that game?
Well, that was my first Super Bowl, 1972, and that was very sad. What I remember about it, there was a great photograph taken by, again, the late, great Dick Darcy, who was our sports photographer, the day that Sonny hurt his Achilles when he had to replace when Kilmer had to go out and replace him, and they sort of walked by each other. Really it was it just sort of symbolized the passing of an era, really. Jurgensen came in, Jurgensen went out, and George Allen wouldn't allow him to stand on the sideline, which I thought was just a terrible injustice for a guy who had played so long in the league, and probably could have helped Billy out a little bit to read, to tell him what he saw on the Dolphins defenses. But in any case, he was just, and that was not he played until I think the end of the 74 season,
right,
where he announced retirement in 74. Right. He played a couple more games. There was a very memorable game against the Miami Dolphins, I recall, where he led a comeback. But he was just. I've never seen a guy throw a ball like that, and I've never seen a guy, by the way, Andy, who could throw the ball underhanded and hit a target 45 yards away.
I saw him.
Or behind his back.
Yeah, I was just going to say, when I was a kid, I was at the Maryland football camp, Jerry Claiborne's camp, and Sonny came out, I believe it was his son Gunner, and they put on a passing exhibition, and I swear he threw it 40 yards behind his back.
He did. I saw it. I mean, I saw it in training camp. I saw it in practices. He had some fun, and that's the other thing about Sonny. He had some fun. The stories about he and Kilmer, going out when we were in Carlisle for training camp and sneaking out at midnight to a very famous, or not so famous, infamous among the coaching staff, place called the Walnut Bottom, which was a bar, and then had a couple of pops. And one year, in fact, he and Kilmer, when Otto Graham was the coach, took Otto's son, who was a ball boy. Sonny knew how to. Sonny always knew how to have a good time.
Yeah, he did, and as he's been open about it, late in his career, he went through some rehab and had to give up alcohol, which he did, and that was a pivotal point for him. But I think of you too in a dual role as just not just a Redskin beat reporter, but you covered him in the media in the Sports Waves column, and as we've been talking about throughout the morning, he was just a natural for that. I mean, did you even have any critique of him as a broadcaster?
I think I did all three of those guys. I did, Frank, Sonny, and Sam were an institution. They were fabulous together. They were not homers, although they obviously wanted the Redskins to win. But if Sonny saw something going wrong on the offense, guess what? He pointed it out, much to the chagrin occasionally of some of the coaches. But he was not afraid to give a strong opinion. He wanted the Redskins to win, and Sam Huff, whose book I wrote back in 1986, same way. And by the way, they were great friends. They were roommates for a while when Sam and Sonny first showed up in the early '60s. And Sam told me again some great stories that we can't talk about on the air.
I'm sure.
But as far as a broadcast team, there was people until satellite communication showed up. When the broadcast was not in sync, with the radio broadcast was not in sync with TV, everybody, and I don't mean everybody, but I would say a vast majority of Redskin fans took the advice of the promos and said, instead of listening to the guys babble on TV, watch the game, but listen to Frank, Sonny, and Sam, because they just were so entertaining, so good, and you wanted to hear Frank Herzog say, "Touchdown, Washington Redskins,"
which I'm going to attempt to get him to do in about 15 minutes. But I think, and I've said this, and I guess you may feel the same way, that all those years where they were going to Super Bowls on a regular basis, and they went to 4 of them over 9 years, that they are the soundtrack of that. When you think of that, you think the early years, the diesel horn, but you certainly think of the banter between the 3 of those guys, right?
Oh, absolutely. And the other thing is that Frank is immortalized because every time, NFL films always use the local radio broadcaster to describe plays on their NFL films, and Frank is he must have thousands of yards of tape somewhere in a vault of all the great plays that they made during the Gibbs era.
Yeah, well, he's got a famous one. It might be the Super Bowl, the first one, where he says they're about to play the most important game ever played before they play another one next year, or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
he had great perspective on that. The other thing, and not to interrupt, but the other thing about that period of time when Frank was doing the games, he was not working for the Redskins. He was working as a local television sportscaster. And you may remember this, when the Redskins got off to an 0-5 start under Joe Gibbs, Frank, as TV Frank, asked Gibbs if he was fearful for his job. He had real objectivity in that.
Absolutely. And we don't have that anymore, as you well know, Andy. Larry Michael, who is now the voice of the Redskins, but is also a vice president on broadcasting, a vice president of broadcasting under Dan Snyder, and he better toe the line. I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong that Larry is on the Pro Football Hall of Fame selection committee. Because everything that happens in that closed meeting winds up back in Dan Snyder's office, and I have a problem with that. Frank Herzog was not like that. Frank told it like it was, and he was on Channel 9, and was a reporter. I mean, I knew Frank when we first arrived in Washington about the same time, and we sort of grew up together. He was terrific. He was good reporter, great on the air, great voice. The whole package.
Yeah, it was a remarkable era, and the bandwagon columns were with Tony, but I think the bandwagon term really started with Glenn Brenner, who would say about those years with the Redskins, it wasn't, we didn't have sports talk radio where the criticism went on all the time. He said the season would start, everybody would get on the bandwagon, and they'd ride it to the Super Bowl, right?
But you better not tell Kornheiser that it was Glenn Brenner who used the term bandwagon first, because he'll probably kill you. But anyway, yeah, you're right, and it was, and that's how it was. It was a great time to be a Redskin fan, and it was a great time to cover the team. I did not cover the team full time during the Gibbs era, but I had enough of I was an editor at the time, but I wound up doing a lot of the stuff anyway, going out there more than occasionally, and a lot of fun.
You have one more a Sonny story that comes to mind? One particular one?
I can't tell it on the air anymore.
Oh, okay.
No. Huff told me. Well, no, I'm not going to tell that story.
Okay.
But no, my great. I have this image of Sonny, not just in the booth, but at Redskin Park after he'd retired. Sonny would always come out, and he did his homework. I mean, he would come out during the week. He didn't have to really, but he would. I would always find him on a couch right in front of where the receptionist sat, and they were friends. But Sonny, you could always find Sonny in the building, and he always sort of sat out in public, and people would just sort of sit down next to him, and he would shoot the breeze. And occasionally, if I needed a quote from somebody who knew how to play quarterback in the NFL, Sonny was always available back then, and he was always on the couch, and that's a lingering memory I will have in my own mind of Sonny, and just loved covering him. Loved being around him.
With the cigar the size of a Louisville Slugger that he always had, usually unlit.
Which was usually not lit.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Hey, great to catch up, Len. Thanks very much for the memories.
Thanks, Andy. I appreciate it.
All right, very good. That's Len Shapiro, and you can read his work online. I think he still writes for the City paper, but many, many years with the Washington Post, and he and I wrote a book together, the Great Washington, D.C. Book of Sports Lists. In fact, we did, at the end of the book, we ranked the 100 greatest D.C. athletes of all time, and I don't even know if he's this low on the list, but just because he wore number 9, we ranked Sonny number 9. And here it is, the 9th of August, as we pay tribute to his great career, both as a player and as a broadcaster, which has come to an end on his terms. He chose to retire, which he announced last night here on AM 630, the new ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. By the way, I've gotten a lot of questions on Twitter and Facebook about how you find this show to be podcasted later. It's ESPN630DC.com. That's ESPN630DC.com. If you've missed any of it, you want to hear all of it, or have heard about it, somebody's told you about it, and you jump in late and you got to get to a meeting or something, go back and listen to the entire show. And if you got some reacting, get to me at Andy Pollin 1, Andy Pollin 1, or Twitter or on Facebook, where I've also posted about this. Next hour, Frank Herzog, 22 years with Sonny in the booth. Chris Cooley, who spent the last 7 with Sonny. Steve Buckhantz, longtime TV reporter and a great play-by-play man in his own right, 22 years the voice of the Wizards, will join us, plus Larry Michael will wrap up the show as he wrapped up the broadcasting career of Sonny Jurgensen during his last years in the booth. All that's still to come as we pay tribute to Sonny Jurgensen here on ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.
Now, from ESPN 630, your DC Sports Center.
All right, what do you find out in preseason football? What you need to do for the regular season. Looks like there's some work to be done. Redskins lost in Cleveland 30-10. Offensive line protection a problem. Case Keenum did throw a 46-yard touchdown pass to Robert Davis, but Dwayne Haskins, the rookie, struggled. 2 interceptions, including a pick 6. They got strong defensive performances from rookies Jimmy Moreland and Cole Holcomb. Next game, FedEx Field, Thursday against Cincinnati. You've heard Sonny Jurgensen announcing his retirement from radio. He's done Redskin games since 1981. WNDA, Mystics beat Indiana 91-78. And the Nats are opening up a weekend series against the Mets in New York tonight. Mets among several teams within 2.5 of the Nats for the wild card lead. Steven Strasburg gets the start tonight. D.C. area weather. No rain today. 89 for a high. Andy Pollin, ESPN 630.
The Bram Weinstein Show.
Trent Williams, this is not a Le'Veon Bell situation. This is not someone who has leverage right now over the team.
Bram Weinstein.
Because if he were to play this game of chicken with the team throughout the entire year, and the reality is you may cut Trent Williams after this year anyway to make a cap savings, it's time to move him.
The Bram Weinstein Show. Now weekday afternoons at 3 on Washington's new home for sports, ESPN 630.
At the Big Screen Store, it's game on. Just in time for football. 2 75-inch Samsung 4K TVs, just $19.99. Whoa, that's 2 for $19.99. The Big Screen Store. At the Big Screen Store, our prices beat Best Buy and online, guaranteed. Plus, we double the Samsung warranty, and you get delivery and installation installed by pros on your schedule. Not even Amazon can do that. The Big Screen Store. The Big Screen Store is your motion furniture headquarters with innovative furniture featuring power headrests, full power recline, USB ports, lighting and accessories, power lumbar support, plus an incredible selection. The Big Screen Store. At the Big Screen Store, it's game on. Just in time for football. 2 75-inch Samsung 4K TVs, just $19.99. Whoa, that's 2 for $19.99. The Big Screen Store.
Tacos, travel, haircuts, hotels. With the PenFed Power Cash Rewards Visa Signature Card, you earn cash back on every. 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 You earn cash back